Good morning to you, my friends, wherever you may be in the world today. Alan Clements here from Maui, Hawaii. July 15th, 2021. Today's sharing came to me last night and this morning. The topic, engaged Buddhism in relationship to the crisis in Myanmar, and I've retitled that, if you will, Revolutionary Dhamma. I'm a little bit phobic of the word isms in relationship to religious isms. Revolutionary Dhamma in relationship to the nationwide militarized terrorism. Let me repeat that. The nationwide militarized terrorism. I should use the word institutionalized as well. An institutionalized terrorism inflicted by the military in Myanmar nationwide upon the people by, and I'm going to take my time today, by the former senior general of the Dhamma. His name is Ming Online. I use the acronym for him, MAH, Ma. And then there's this State Administration Council known as SAC, MASAC. Nationwide institutionalized, militarized terrorism inflicted by Ming Online and the State Administration Council, MASAC, the acronym MASAC, upon the people. And I want to talk and relate and try to bring some clarity for myself, really, and perhaps you as well, on the role of Dhamma, here engaged Buddhism, engaged Buddhists, people who define their lives by the teachings attributed to the Buddha. Buddhism. I mean, all sects, all traditions, all ethnicities worldwide. Chinese, Vietnamese, Thai, Indonesian, Lankan, Indian, Burmese, Malay, American, Canadian, Australian, German, English, South American, African, all Buddhists worldwide. Engaging your Buddhism specifically in support of the people of Burma and challenging this militarized, nationwide, institutionalized terrorism directed pretty much singularly by this former senior general, now turned rogue terrorist, Ming Online, and his terrorist group that he's named State Administration Council. And it's best known by the terrorist organization under the acronym MASAC. Engaged Buddhism. I was doing some investigation before today's talk about it, and the term engaged Buddhism is attributed to the Vietnamese monk Thich Nhat Hanh, apparently in the 1950s. He brought forth the concept on the role of the Sangha, the role of Buddhists, to not turn a blind eye to the suffering of the people. Rather, to engage in what would we call active compassion, active loving kindness, active dana, active sila, active bhavana, active meditation, active consciousness in context to the suffering that we perceive through our senses, and bringing our Dhamma or Buddhism, engaging this Buddhism from within to alleviate the hunger, the starvation, the terror, the overall dukkha or the suffering of the people. Engaged Buddhism. And I also want to address personally although I'm not a member of the formal Bhikkhu Sangha, I definitely am a resident being with a long-standing, deep, I would call the highest respect for the Bhikkhu Sangha and the Bhikkhuni Sangha, the Tilashins in Burma, the nuns and the monks, and the laity. As a long-time resident of the country and a short-term monk myself under the tutelage of the late Venerable Mahasi Sayadaw and his successor, the late Venerable Sayadaw U Pandita, I'm a child of the Dhamma, of the Buddha, of the Sangha of Myanmar. And so I would like to also address in my own polite, humble, perhaps at times direct way, no insulting intended, the monastic Sangha in Myanmar, their role, that as I see it, obviously. So a complex topic at a complex moment in human history in an incredibly complex context in Myanmar at this very moment, 53, 54, 55 million people under the terrorist reign of Masak. We are blown away. Our minds and hearts are cracked open by the unremitting evil, if you will, the unrelenting evil of Ming Online and his terrorist group, Masak, and what he is currently unleashing upon the people. Assassination, arbitrary arrest, systematic rape, pillaging of business, persecution of nuns, monks, doctors, teachers, professors. The unremitting threat of unrelenting terror, if you will, upon the people, along with the rape, the torture of the people. The prisons are filled with revolutionary members of Burma's democracy struggle, including the state councillor Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, the president U Win Myint, one of the senior Nayakas of the National League for Democracy, U Win Tain, thousands of other men and women, from journalists to filmmakers, to poets, to writers, to mothers. Indiscriminate terror in Burma today. So that's the landscape. And the call here is the call to action, and what is the responsibility, the moral imperative of a Buddhist who wishes to use their meditative insights, their Dhamma insights, in a way that are proactive to the betterment of society and specifically to the betterment of the people of Burma, both Buddhists outside and Buddhists inside the country. What can they do? This is the question I want to pose. Not what should they do. It's almost impossible to evoke the should within conscience unless it's right up close to one's own self-interest. I mean, are you willing to be burned by the heat of dictatorship in order to feel the pain of that fire enough to motivate the engagement of one's Dhamma into direct action to support and potentially alleviate, if not eliminate, the dukkha or the suffering specifically of the people of Myanmar right now? And I use the word people of Myanmar to include the entirety, the full spectrum of ethnicities. The main ethnicities and all the, not sub-ethnicities, but the minority people, tribal people, 135 different ethnicities in the country of Myanmar, a country the size of Germany or France, the state of Texas in the United States. Okay. Engaged Buddhism did not originate with Thich Nhat Hanh. As I see it, it seems to have originated with a Burmese Buddhist monk known by the name of U Ottama. I'm not sure exactly the year or the date of his birth in Burma. May have been as late as 1879, and he perhaps passed away, if I'm not incorrect, in 1939. U Ottama. Relatively unknown around the world, radically well known within the country of Myanmar, but not often associated with the power of his role and his commitment and his ethical Dhamma courage, if you will, to confront British white oppressive genocidal imperialism. One could attribute that the freedom movement in Burma, the independence movement in Burma, began with U Ottama. Now, he was arrested numerous times for his, you want to use the word fiery speeches, but thinking about the role of Dhamma courage, engaged, I don't want to use Buddhism, but the engagement of the qualities within one's own psyche and consciousness. These Dhamma attributes, the paramis, please look them up in Wikipedia or in Buddhist books online. The paramis, the 10 paramis, patience, loving kindness, determination, truthfulness, effort, resolution, deep resolve, dana, ethical wisdom, wisdom itself, embodied wisdom in dynamic engagement, revolutionary Dhamma, not Buddhism. Consciousness, this is the beauty of Dhamma for me personally, maybe for you as well, is that when we take the ism out of it, then we must abide, try to abide within the living cognitive textures of these states of mind, states of consciousness. Conscience itself. U Ottama, although the Universal Declaration of Human Rights wasn't conceived at the time of his life, as I can see it today, revolutionary Dhamma in Burma specifically, call it engaged Buddhism as well, is a deep regard for the 30 articles of the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The root of them is dignity, the inalienable rights of the individual, irrespective of religion, culture, language, rooted in conscience, all beings rooted inalienably in conscience and dignity, deserve the right to live without fear and without need, in the sanctity of all of us supporting and protecting and elevating the freedom that we innately have as human beings on this planet to think our own thoughts in respect to the context of others. In peaceful unity, may those thoughts be supported. Freedom of mind. Meditation, the fine mindful art of liberating thought from fear, greed, and delusion, liberating cetasikas or emotionality from fear, greed, and delusion, taking the ism out of the psyche, taking Buddhism out of consciousness and bringing it into the universality of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and engaging Dhamma principles, Dharma principles, in relationship to the actions of protecting and elevating the good, the true, and the beautiful. Our role as human beings, not engaged Buddhists, engaged Christians, Muslims, engaged atheists, human citizens of the world who love life, who respect the source of struggle and freedom to be within human consciousness. A love of freedom is engaged Dhamma, revolutionary Dhamma. And the responsibility that we have as humans to empower this love of freedom and to study the machinations of freedom and how we compromise freedom and jeopardize freedom and how we can support the freedom of others. It's so simple to me. It's so straightforward. The freedom of the people of Burma is under unthinkable terrorist domination right now by Masak. You don't have to be a Buddhist or a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or an atheist or an agnostic or whatever to love the beauty of your hands, your mind, your thoughts, the ability to walk to a store, to bathe, to go to school, to sing a song, to watch a film, to open a store, to have your daughter and your son taught a specific language or mathematics or history freely and openly. The civilization of society is about Dhamma, Dhamma culture, not Buddhism. And so I think one of the things for me here as I listen to myself is to decouple religion, all these avenues of separation. And this is what I call world Dhamma, world Dharma, revolutionary states of consciousness in support of the overcoming of suffering of other people. I wish I could be more articulate about this because there's tears and there's blood and there's rape and there's assassination right now. I mean, if in fact all Buddhists worldwide were listening and wanting to do something, what could we create for those Buddhists to become more engaged, and what actions of engagement would we want? Well, I think one would be to hear, learn to hear. I guess it maybe comes down to creative empathy. How do we hear? How well could we feel the cry, the hurt, the isolation, the pain, the suffering of the girl being raped in insane prison at this very moment by men loyal to Masak, indoctrinated in the delusion of a type of satanic evil? How well could we hear her? Then if it was our daughter, our wife, our mother, our sister, in that level of intimate association, I just think it's just really dealing with the emotional physics of closeness and intimate proximity of other as self, other as family, where there's a deep, deep, deep abiding regard for the sanctity of life beyond politics and separation and wealth and status and all the ways in which we divide and separate and deny this intrinsic inseparability, if you will. My lungs are your lungs. My psyche is your psyche. My daughter is my daughter. Your daughter is my daughter. So how do we create formations within life to dissolve the barrier of separation? I think it was Gandhi, actually, U Ottama, by the way, in Burma, had spent a considerable amount of time, if I'm not mistaken, in India and associated with Mahatma Gandhi, introduced Gandhian nonviolent principles to Burma. This was long before the 1950s in Vietnam with the Vietnamese monks. And, Burma is this ancient land that empowered the Satipatthana Sutta as vocation of its Dhamma, but at the same time, it had 135 years of white supremacist occupation. England, Britain, and those of you who have studied the occupation, the imperialism of Britain on the people of Myanmar, it was brutal, it was genocidal, it was humiliating, it was no different than Ma Sachs' form of terrorism done upon the people by the whites out of England. U Ottama, a Buddhist monk, said no, told, what's his name, Craddock, gave a radical speech. Get out of the country, Craddock. I think he was the Governor General of Myanmar at the time. And he was imprisoned. U Ottama was imprisoned. They tried to torture him and shame him and mock him and do all that they could to try to rid the human heart of its love of freedom and justice and compassion in action. I mean, this man and his principles should be elevated to the status of the highest order today in Myanmar as a radical expression, Siddhagu Sayadaw and the Nayaka Sayadaws in Rangoon, all the leading men, and of course the bhikkhunis as well, the nuns, the tilashins, many hundreds of thousands of monks and many tens of thousands of nuns in Myanmar. We have an example. U Ottama, Mahatma Gandhi himself, if I'm not mistaken, was in Burma in 1929. He met with the monks at the Shwedagon Pagoda, challenging the white supremacists, the white occupiers of his own country in India, and the same was going down in the country of Burma, in Myanmar. And he advocated to the monks, along with U Ottama, the power of ahimsa, or the power of nonviolence. This is where Aung San Suu Kyi, in her time in India, with her mother, the ambassador from Myanmar to the country of India. And she began to be associated with all of these principles. I know this from our discussions back in '95 after her first release from house arrest. Burma and Myanmar, the two most popular names for this country, are deeply immersed and rooted in radical activism, not so much of Buddhism alone, but of Dhamma, a country, a nation of activists. And so, by way of saying, we've got examples of what engaged Buddhism looks like around the world. Hey guys and girls, wherever you may be, study the books that Fergus and I put out. I mean, I wish I could give them away. Random House dropped our book contract. We had to self-publish. And they're out there. It's not our work, it's the people's work. We represent the people. Burma's Voices of Freedom. These 4 volumes, 2,000 pages, they could have been 4,000 pages, 7,000 pages. There are at least another 150 interviews that I did, that Fergus transcribed, that we edited, that aren't included in the books. Every one of these are about revolutionary Dhamma in action. I use the word Dhamma here because it's convenient to me, but it doesn't mean Buddhist principles alone. It's really a pointing to the Dharma word, which can be infused within any system or philosophy, any spirituality. It's a universal term that points to states of consciousness that care for the well-being of others equal to one's own self-interests. And how to decode isms, philosophies, and segregations and ideologies from these timeless principles inherent in consciousness, so that human beings care for one another as family members beyond respective nations, religions, philosophies, and segregations. We all want to overcome our prejudice and apartheid, our impotence, our apathy. So without the study of consciousness and the deep mindful intelligence in looking at these states of consciousness and understanding the essential role for me, and I'm just a child in the development of empathy, but how do we hear that girl? I dare even use the word R-A-P-E. I dare even use the word rape. It's so evil. It's so wrong. It's so not right. We have to feel the not rightness of something, Buddhists worldwide. It's not right to allow people to suffer when we ourselves live in comfort. It's wrong for us to accumulate income and wealth and status when other people in mass are suffering and hungry, are being tortured and being violated. We would no longer allow our neighbor's house to burn and say it's unfortunate that his or her house is burning and it's connected to our own house. The folly of denying interdependence, interrelatedness, is really about one breath, one tear, one heart, one mind, one world. And I think that's the challenge for all of us on an evolutional level, if you're with me in this dance, to try to do what we can to root our Dhamma, root our Dharma, root our theology, root our ethical wisdom, root our compassion in the caring for others. And all I can suggest here, there's so much more that I could do, all of us could do. Root our love of freedom as inseparable from the freedom of another being. These are the heroines, these are the heroes, these are the Uotamas, these are the Mahatma Gandhis, these are the Thich Nhat Hanhs, these are the Daw Aung San Suu Kyis, the U Win Tains, the U Tin Us, the U Win Tins, the U A Mongs. These are the Martin Luther Kings. These are the great women all throughout every country, every era, who stood up and said, no, you cannot violate my body. You cannot violate the sanctity of my heart. I have to get better at this so that I feel more inspired to be more clear, to evoke change. That's what I want. I would throw in a high dose of MEO, a high dose of the DMT, a high dose of lysergic acid. I would throw in a high dose of whatever is required to soften the defenses. All Buddhists worldwide should do this weekend with a guide, MDMA, and ask yourself, what can I do to support the well-being of my fellow sisters and brothers undergoing institutionalized, militarized terrorism by Ming Online, Ma Sac. Fill our walls with flat screens of live images of rape, of murder, of assassination. Imagine them coming into your house, your flat, and we have images of Myanmar's police and military with their batons, their rifles, their stun guns, their poisons, their fires, their wrath, their indoctrination, their demonic nature. And there they are. Now we've come for you, Mr. Clements. Now we have come for you, Mr. Dalai Lama. Now we are coming for you, Reverend Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Now we're coming for you, President Joseph Biden. We're in the White House, and guess what? Totalitarianism has caught up with you. It's like, it's so crazy. But I think we need to learn more and more of the fine art of going spiritually crazy. I dare even quote R.D. Laing when he said, Insanity is a sane response to an insane world. Could we say the same about the Dhamma and about meditation? We've got it all wrong. The world should be peaceful today with what we know. We're putting people into outer space. We can digitally broadcast across domains. We can text and love and touch. Look at the healing modalities. Look at the surgeries that we have. Look at the medical interventions that we have, and the aircraft and the cars, and look at the intelligences that we have. And yet we still rape and kill and assassinate, but worse than that, we allow it to happen. There's something so deranged and insane about that normalization, right? So in the engaged Buddhist world, those who are trying to apply insights from their meditation, it's like, how have I normalized inaction? We know I should do more. Wherever you are around the world, it's not just sending money to nonprofits to smuggle it into Burma. There's so many creative ways that you or I could encourage our fellow Sangha members worldwide to rise up in a cacophony of compassion and blow the world away with Dhamma in action. It would be the most heroic expression of miracle. The Red Sea parting would be nothing to the stopping of Ming Online and the State Administration Council in Myanmar, if only the Buddhists, not even for a weekend, even for a couple of hours, did something creative, radical. Do it. Put up on your Facebook page, on your Twitter page. Post this video. Simple, sharing. Overcome your dislike of whatever I'm saying, or even of your dislike of me. Share, share, share. Why just watch and listen? That's called inaction. That's apathy. That's not really getting the message of the beauty of caring for others, as Aung San Suu Kyi said, equal to oneself. How to make each other family. I wish I knew. I wish I knew how to overcome personal self-interest sufficiently enough to dedicate my existence. No, don't be so theatrical, Alan. Just simply do little acts of courage and little acts of conscience in action. Be invisible in your compassion. Be overt, be creative, be radical, be satirical. Dance, create, write lyrics, do books and little films and snippets of great ways to support the people. No, support the people. What could we do? And I think that's where the beauty of creativity and Dhamma and meditation come in. Let me invite you halfway through this talk, if you're listening, one, obviously, share this thing endlessly. I just don't understand when the house is burning, our beloved Myanmar, the source of most of the mindfulness studies that we have in the world, most of the radical activism that we've seen in the last 30 years, right out of Myanmar, why we aren't doing more. Do it. Meanwhile, what are some of the creative ways that you personally can do to support the people of Burma? May I invite you, if you're a Dhamma teacher, a nun, a monk, whatever tradition, whatever country you live in. I'm going to get to the monks and the clergy and to the Sangha, the bhikkhus and the Tilashins in Myanmar in a second. But Buddhists worldwide, write down a list of 5 things that I could do, and then a list of 2 that challenge you to your core and make a dare to yourself that you're willing to do one of those 2 things this week. Remember, it is our role, our sila role, our Dhamma integrity, the intelligence of our Dharma, to care for each other, to really care for each other in action. I know around the tables in the monastery in Burma, we were encouraged as monks to look out for the elders at the table. I remember eating with Seda U Pandita on a frequent basis. And because I was such a young monk at that time, and always the table had elder monks, I watched these older monks, as a general rule, look silently and feel the context of the table, 4, 5, or 6 monks. And one of the most beautiful art forms of interrelated dana, or generosity and an intimate display of shared splendor, is that they would serve a senior more monk whatever he was choosing to eat, but just a small amount, so that the monk that was more senior to yourself didn't have to serve himself. That level of interrelated dana, the tapestry of spiritual intelligence. How do we do that for the people of Myanmar? Mahatma Gandhi, if I'm not wrong, said to the monks in Shwedagon Pagoda in 1929, I don't know the Hindu or the Sanskrit word for liberation, swajraha, something. But he said, the success of our movement will be on our willingness to suffer. The success of our liberation will be on our willingness to suffer. I find that very interesting. I'm going to do some research on what he meant by that word. But I think there's an elegant way to suffer in overcoming unrecognized pride, separation, self-preservation over other. And we have to learn, I think, to suffer the consequences of decathexing, overcoming the invisibility of these attachments, if you will, to self being more important than other. We talk so much, at least I've heard so much talk, about the concept within traditional Dhamma or Buddhism known as anatta, the emptiness of self. I would only advocate right now that ourselves are so intrinsically placed within the cognitive ecosystem of consciousness to develop an identity complex that releases ourselves from these idealized absolutes of emptiness and actually develops a relationship with a more dignified self-identity that sees itself giving more freely, doing more compassion, and deliberately holding oneself accountable, if you will, to taking actions rather than simply observing thoughts and emotions within the sky of one's own mind. To me, that's not really recognizing the delusion of inaction, if you will. Uottama. Can't imagine going to prison for your beliefs, for your actions of love. Something about self-love and about the expression of love as a revolutionary expression of political activism. We tend to hear protests and screams and what he or she didn't do well enough or could have done better. But very few out there lead with the radical magic of love, the sanctity of elevating the happiness of others. love in action. And I think there's just something, in my limited expression of that, there's something so beautiful in knowing that our activism, our engaged Buddhism, our meditation out of the meditation hall, off the cushion, out of the monastery, is an expression of the greatest quality in this universe, love. Leading with love, growing love, evolving this metta field, and doing everything we can through the power of the ahimsa, harmlessness and nonviolence, to activate, the radiance of love. I care for you so much, there's nothing that I will not do for you. I love you that much. That's pretty radical. So the list that you've made, holding yourself accountable, as I come to the end of this, I'll put more thought into it tonight and tomorrow, maybe do a round 2 tomorrow if I'm feeling it. Engage Buddhism, revolutionary Dhamma, in relationship to the institutional, militarized, nationwide terrorism of Myanmar, Masak, the terrorist designation now given to the former senior general of Burma and the former armed forces, Masak, the Pol Pot of Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge, earliest stages of Pol Pot's satanic evil. We don't know how dark Burma is going to get. It's pretty dark right now. I've been talking quite a lot about not allowing Burma to become the next Tibet. A genocide of Tibet, I think 2.5 million Tibetans killed under the genocidal reign of the Chinese. Pol Pot, 1.2 million or more. We think of the genocides in Rwanda, in Bosnia, obviously during the Holocaust, the massacres of the indigenous people in my country of America, in Canada and Australia, the European countries, Africa, South America. It takes my speech away to think of my brothers and sisters in Myanmar right now. I'm going to think of my own list of creative expressions and really try to radicalize them, create revolutionary energy within them, maybe through theater and film, maybe a more radicalized expression of the podcast and the live streams, maybe taking a little bit more time to construct the verses of what I say, becoming more acute in language and energy. I remember talking to Aung San Suu Kyi about these very topics in 95 and 96 and later on in the 2000s. She would so say that this idea of engaged anything was so aberrant. Freedom is freedom. No one is an island. We're all interconnected. At that time, monks were there, nuns were there, priests were there, Muslims were there, atheists were there, Jews were there. It was so trans-religious. It was about freedom and democracy in action, the liberation of the country from dictatorship. There are so many examples. How to overcome your apathy, how to overcome your separation, how to overcome your privilege. Let me address the Sangha in Burma. It's a delicate topic, but I'm not going to be delicate. It's pathetic to see the Sangha in Burma right now. To see the cult of inaction. And you can be sure, though, Alan, that there are a lot of nuns and a lot of monks that are very, very revolutionary in their thought. But because of the long-standing tradition of social, spiritual, cultural obedience in Asia, and specifically in Myanmar, it's very challenging to be a voice of change, to be a Gandhi, an U Ottama. How to reinvent the Sangha, to break step with the orthodoxy of inaction and rise in the fidelity of the spirit of Dhamma, not the letter of Dhamma being interpreted by the elders, but the spirit of Dhamma. Activate your own U Ottama, your own Gandhi, your own king, your own King Ashoka, your own great leadership. Great leadership. Be a leader, a visionary nun, a visionary monk. What would I do if I were in Burma right now and I was a Myanmar monk? Well, I can say this. I have been in that country as a Burmese American monk. And I've had the dialogue as a layman with senior monks in that country. I'm specifically relating right now, just spontaneously, to my books with my friend and colleague Fergus Harlow, our books, Burma's Voices of Freedom. I'm not sure which volume it's in. Maybe the second volume. But if any of you are wanting to read a manual on engaged Buddhism, okay? Revolutionary Dhamma. Go specifically and read the late Venerable Seda U Pandita's section of conversations that I had with him a month prior to his passing away in 2016. We dove in the most uninhibited way with the very issues I'm bringing up here in this live stream that are very much front and center among the Sangha in Burma, the Sangha around the globe, and the Burmese Buddhist, American Buddhist, Canadian Buddhist, Australian Buddhist, European Buddhist, all Buddhists who have a deep affinity to Burma and to Dhamma in Burma. The dialogue that's going on right now, I really wish you would study these 4 volumes, Burma's Voices of Freedom. I wish someone, a philanthropist, not even a lot of money, would buy 10,000 copies, 5,000 copies, 1,000 copies, and give them out to leaders worldwide. But more to the point here, read Seda U Pandita's section, Wisdom for the World, Mindful Advice for the People of My Country. He outlines in the most beautifully succinct manner revolutionary Dhamma in action to challenge authoritarianism, dictatorship, totalitarianism. Read U Win Tin, U Win Tain, U Tinu's interviews on bringing revolutionary Dhamma to the prison cell even to torture. Therein lies radiant examples of what engaged Buddhism looks like in Myanmar. Siddhagu Sayadaw, read Sayadaw U Pandita's section of our books, Burma's Voices of Freedom. Translate them into Burmese, every other language in the country of Burma. And let the nuns and monks in the country study the words of what is required at this time under duress and pressure, the terrorism of Masak. Your role, Mr. Siddhagu Sayadaw, your role, Mahanayaka Sayadaw, your role, 500,000 bhikkhus in the country of Burma, and the 75, 100, 150,000 Tilashans, the nuns. Your role in this revolution of the human mind to support the elevation of freedom of conscience and dignity, rule of law and peace. This is not politics. Or if it's politics, it's inseparable with the word Dhamma. Oxygen is oxygen. Human life is human life. Life on the planet is life on the planet. There is no separation unless you make it. We're all in this together. Read those manuals of radical Dhamma in action to challenge Ming Online's evil satanic organization known as Masak. Therein lies, that's the work. We have voices of revolution. What I would advocate, I've talked about it in previous live streams, but I'll say it again here in this one. The monks and nuns in Myanmar are the most powerful institution, I would say the most powerful nonviolent institution community in the country. The military and the police, under the indoctrination of totalitarianism ruled by the cruel leader Ming Online, has the weapons. So we have nonviolence, we have the Gandhian Buddhist ahimsa, nonviolent, powerful institution of the Sangha, and we have the Masak terrorist organization, about equal in size. And the question here is, what will you do, Sangha, to challenge the institutionalized, militarized, nationwide terrorism of Masak? At this point, your response is less than favorable. However, if there are leaders within that collective body known as the Tilashans and the Bhikkhus, the monks and nuns, I say, do what you can do within your power. Number one. What I want to suggest is refuse to collude. Refuse to collude with Masak and the cronies, the police, and the military. Refuse their donations. Refuse their men, women, daughters, children, and friends to become nuns and monks, even temporarily. Refuse to collude. Simple. Draw a line in the sand through actions that says we do not accept or approve or wish to collude with the way in which you are terrorizing the people. Point one. Refuse to collude. Personally, I think the Mahasangha of Rangoon and the country, the Mahasangha, Nayaka Sangha, collectively should dedicate the Vasa, the 3-month period here, to an incessant Dhamma sharing on two things that come to mind. An incessant Dhamma sharing. You do what you do. You educate people in Dhamma. What specific teachings right now in the Dhamma are the most powerful and the most valuable? What comes to my mind spontaneously is talk specifically about the power of non-violent harmony, peace, the attributes of unity, harmony, and peace and non-violence. Invent those Dhamma talks 1,000 different ways. Flood the villages, flood the military compounds, flood your social media streams, flood national television if there's live channels willing to broadcast you, Mr. Siddhagu Sayadaw and other Mahananga Sayadaws. Every monk, every nun in the country can empower the power of nonviolence, harmony, unity, and peace. Okay? Let's get a little bit more radical. Burma is a country primarily of Buddhists, but Buddhism isn't necessarily unique in its understanding or in its empowerment of cause and effect and of heaven and hell, different dimensions of birth and death based upon the accumulation of forces of conditioning and what's known as kamma and vipaka, cause and effect. I remember teachers in the monastery looking around, talking about the notion of rebirth and say, look around at the animals and the birds. Why do you think we have centipedes and scorpions and roaches and rats? Why do you think of yourself as exclusive from the conditions of samsara? Life forms based on causes and conditions. Speak about causality. Acting from an impure mind, speaking from an impure mind, acting with cruelty and harm and denigrating life results in rebirth or redeath as an animal or a peta or a ghost. Flood the country, flood social media with descriptions of hell. Let every boy and girl in that country, every man and woman, every policeman, every policewoman, every soldier, every commander, let Ming Online himself be forced to tune out the incessant, radiant Dhamma teachings of causality. If you do this, this will arise. And let him and all people in this Masak terrorist organization know that their destiny, if they continue to act in denigration and torture and rape and cruelty to the people, their destination will be hell, will be the apayalokas, will be insects, will be roadkill, will be roaches. The Dalai Lama does it, the Christians do it, the Catholics do it, purgatory. The Buddha did it. Siddhagu Sayadaw, speak of all the ways in which actions and speech lead to purgatory. Keep that as an active, radiant teaching within the country right now. And perhaps it will instigate hiri and ottappa, conscious regret, conscious shame. Buddhism's core tenet is redemption. We all know about Angulimala, the mass murderer. The Buddha said to him, I have stopped. Don't tell me to stop. It's you, Angulimala, who hasn't stopped your greed, your anger, your delusion. The Mahanayaka Sangha of Burma could reinvent 1,000 different ways the teachings of the Buddha meeting Angulimala. Stop your anger. Stop your greed. Stop your delusion. If you do not stop or cease these three streams of cetana or action, you will inevitably follow the karma principle of lawful rebirth as an animal, a peta, a ghost, a demon, suffering eons of hardship and horror. It's what you believe. Speak up, but don't sit in apathy and smile at the donations that Ming Online and other commanders and cronies are given to the monks and nuns. Speak up to the issues. Okay. Refuse to collude. Elevate the Dhamma that's appropriate to the needs right now of those who need to hear it the most. Ming Online and his terrorist satanic cult Masak, and the military and the police, and it's an act of compassion to do everything humanly possible to evoke hiri and otapa, conscious shame, conscious regret, and let these policemen and military, who knows, maybe even senior commanders, maybe Ming Online himself, will weep in redemption in his own Angulimala moment and don the robes, seek forgiveness, practice meditation at the Mahasi Thatanayekta or under you, Mr. Sitagu Sayadaw, or any number of other monasteries in the country, and he'll give back all that he has taken. Think of how to creatively create redemption moments in the military and the police. Engaged Buddhism. Refuse to collude. And I will end with this one. I mean, it's radical. Well, dare to activate your Sayadaw U Ottama. Dare to overcome your pathology of dogmatic Buddhism and invoke in yourself the radicalization of empowering your creative use of your Dhamma and your voice to pinpoint the most powerful action that you could do as a senior monk or nun. What would that most potent action be? As a powerful leader, the Pope, you, Sitagu Sayadaw, you, any number of other 100, 200, 500 Sayadaws in the country, not just Sitagu Sayadaw. What could you say if you had an hour to say it? That would be your U Ottama. That would be your get out of the country-cratic speech. That would be your Gandhi holding that handful of salt to the sun that sent the British into a pandemonium of disarray. Obliterate the tyranny of Masak. Be so creative in your Jesus, in your Moses, in your Buddha with Angulimala Ming Online, that it's the thing in this universe that is remembered 20, 30, 100 years. U Ottama passed away in 1939. Think 70, 80, 100 years from now, senior nuns and monks in Burma. How would you like to be known? Because you'll be forgotten or you'll be shamed through your inaction without being radical in saying exactly what you know you can say and knowing when you can say it and to whom you should say it. And write that Dhamma talk, write that speech, and say no to evil. call it out in the most interesting, creative Dhamma way. And my last point here is there's something about, I just so love the Sangha of Myanmar. I love the Sangha worldwide. I'm a son of the Buddha in my own humble, rebel Dhamma way. But I was blessed to be a monk in your country. It was such a gift. And one of the things that I really learned from U Tin U and Do Aung San Suu Kyi and so many of the other civilian leaders of it wasn't just the political movement. These people coupled radical, innovative Dhamma and trans-religious principles into social, political, and environmental change. It was a revolution of the spirit. It undressed the robe and the artifice and the ism, if you will, from the vocation of all of us being in this together. Democracy means you and me, and we must take our responsible part in enacting freedom and human rights and environmental sanctity together beyond our religion. What would I do? I think back at Saffron. I think back at those monks that dared to walk the streets and chant the Metta Sutta. They walked right down University Avenue past Aung San Suu Kyi's house. And it said that she was able to look out and saw them. You uphold metta in the world, Sangha in Burma. You uphold the power of this timeless frequency of unconditional love. You talk about the power of these teachings of love to relax the intent of an elephant that wishes to kill the Buddha. That it pacifies the demonic psyche of deities inhabiting in a forest that's preventing other bhikkhus from concentrating and achieving panya and nibbana. And the Buddha was teaching the metta to pacify evil, anger, and greed. Teach this Metta Sutta, and may you every day broadcast it out of your monastery. And my final point, I'm a dreamer. I would so love to see on CNN and BBC, all of a sudden, people calling me, Alan, do you realize in Burma today, the monks and nuns are walking out of their monasteries. Not all of them, but 10 at a time, 6 at a time, 50 at a time. What are they doing? And they're chanting over and over again the Metta Sutta as they walk with their few belongings barefoot. The power of earthing and feeling and anointing Dhamma in revolutionary action. Where are they going? They're just simply walking home, street, village. The whole country has become 54 University Avenue. The whole country has embraced a revolution of the spirit. The whole country has embraced a trans-engaged Buddhist expression of revolutionary global Dharma. What are they doing? They're inspiring hope among the people who feed them, who give them medicines and robes and build their monasteries. They're showering them with the grace of giving back hope in action. They're walking step by mindful step to Naypyidaw. And they're being housed in monasteries all along the way, and people are feeding them. Muslims are feeding them, Catholics are feeding them, and the lay people are learning the Metta Sutta, and the boys and girls all around the country. And Burma has become this radiant sonic song of metta in dynamic action. And we see for the first time in human history the true power of creating a new sutta, a new iteration of Dhamma in revolutionary action, breaking the code of apathy and inaction, using the timeless transformational teachings of the Buddha himself, of metta, walking to Naypyidaw like Gandhi walked to the sea. I don't know, I'm a dreamer. There's something to me so beautiful about that. May it be so that the nuns and the monks all throughout the country, and may the Catholics and the Jews and the Muslims and the atheists and all the everyone begin to join in and chant a trans-Buddhistic version of metta. May all beings be happy. Ming Online and his Masak, may you be free of your indoctrination with greed, delusion, and fear. Whatever it is that you can invent in the hymns of love. I'm a dreamer. Seda U Pandita encouraged me to dream big, just like the Bodhisattva. He wasn't a Buddhist. He was a being dedicated to the vocation of transforming adversarial circumstances with the power of kindness, love, and wisdom, and patience, and determination. There was no Buddhism there. He probably had no knowledge that he was going to be a Buddha, or he made a Buddhist vow to become a Buddha under Sammeta. Millions and eons of times of births and deaths in those Jataka tales of a Bodhisattva dedicated to elevating the power of love and compassion beyond the ism. Remember our roots, Mahanayaka Sayadaws and nuns and monks in Burma. First, we were human. Secondly, we adopted Buddhism. Dhamma is trans-religious. Our role is to see ourselves as a family, global relatives by human birth, by democratic principles, by the love of human rights, by the sanctity of food and water and trees and light. May I encourage all the Sangha in Burma, please radicalize your Dhamma. Do everything humanly possible. I've outlined just a few of the steps that I would say from the outside of a reformation of a trans-engaged Buddhism. March to Naypyidaw and do what we know is the most powerful act on earth. Sit and surround the adversary. You, Angulimala, have not stopped. And show Ming Online in his Masak what it means to have stopped your own flow of greed, anger, and delusion. And I say, let Naypyidaw become the capital of the Dhamma of the universe. Sit in meditative silence. Sit and allow the world to see the beauty of revolutionary Dhamma in Burma. Not only restore democracy, not only the immediate release of Daw Aung San Suu Kyi and others, the thousands of others, but the unification of the country, the elevation of the greatest birth of democracy in our era. And all of a sudden, there is a luminous, bright sun of hope in this world. It's in your hands, nuns and monks in Burma. It's just understanding the power of the Dhamma in action. May all of us worldwide, as I end, join this revolution of the spirit as brothers and sisters in democracy and freedom. And may we create the most epic new sutta, the Metta Sutta, that restored democracy in Burma and brought a new dimension of freedom and nonviolent activism to the forefront of the world, adopted so well around the world that we have finally a moment of unity in our beloved world. So from my heart to yours, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for sharing this video. Thank you for listening. And God willing, see you tomorrow at 9:30.